Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, automate tasks, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at Valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Paul Molinari, the founder of Popcorn. Paul's career is a masterclass in strategic marketing and execution built on over 20 years of experience, including leading marketing efforts that scaled Crunchtime from a scrappy startup into a go-to back-of-house software for brand names like Jersey Mike's, Five Guys, and Dunkin' Donuts. A trained graphic designer with an MBA from Northeastern, Paul has driven over $100 million in attributed revenue for clients like General Motors and AstraZeneca. Now through Popcorn, he helps restaurant technology companies not only brand and position themselves, but also implement complex solutions, leveraging his unique blend of creative instinct and data-driven discipline. Paul's commitment to delivering both strategic direction and hands-on execution is a blueprint for productizing your expertise and achieving rapid revenue growth. Paul, welcome to The Growth Shift.
David, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for that very kind introduction. Thank you.
You've done all the work. I'm just here to share a bit of this journey, so it's all on you, my friend. Paul, glad to have you on the show today.
Thanks.
Now, Paul, your journey began in marketing, driving brands for giants like General Motors and AstraZeneca. Tell us a little bit more about that foundational journey, what some of the things are that you learned along the way, and how you ultimately started founding Popcorn.
Well, I think that, right now, everybody can divide their career up into acts, right? Like the same way like a movie is played out. I'm probably in my third act. But in my first act, I've always been a creative person. I've always been someone who loves music and art. And, when I graduated school, I wanted to get into marketing. I didn't know necessarily what it was. I thought marketing was advertising. Obviously, it is so much more than that. But at the time, I wanted to work. I wanted to work in the ad industry, and the reality is that it just wasn't there for me. This is of course pre-internet, when people had to find jobs. It was more like through who you knew, or literally creating your resume and typing up cover letters and sending them out to HR departments, a different way to kind of break through. So I had to think a little bit outside the box, and I knew that I wanted to work in music and stereo equipment and consumer electronics. And the quickest route for me to get there was to actually work for a company called Nobody Beats the Whiz. I don't know if think of it as like Best Buy or Circuit City, a consumer electronics store in the New York area. And the reason why I wanted to go work for them, because I remember being a Yankees fan and a Knicks fan and a Rangers fan. I would see all of their ads all over the place, on the home run wall, on the hockey ice rink. Nobody Beats the Whiz. Terrible name. But nonetheless, I got in touch with their headquarters and I said, hey, I'd love to join your marketing department. They say, well, that's great, but you have to work in a store. Okay. So I went to go work in a store, and I knew so much about all of these things that they immediately made me a manager. Now I'm working there as a college graduate, working in a retail store, and not too happy, but nonetheless, I'm surrounded by all this great equipment, and I'm running a small team. Well, one day in walks this big gentleman, 6'8", big fella, right? Kind of disheveled. He walks in, all of a sudden, all my sales guys like disappear. And I go, okay, so I'll walk up to him so I say, excuse me, sir, what are you looking for? And he asks for a certain product for the Turk antennas. Now, at the time, antennas, particularly powered amplified antennas, were the way that you got radio stations in from really far away. So I said to him, well, you must be trying to get like Howard Stern or something from the city. Yeah, exactly. So I show him the antennas, show him everything. He's like, wow, that's a great pitch. I was like, well, thank you. He's like, that's my company. I was like, oh, you're kidding. And I'm like, no, my name, I'm Neil Turk, and I'm actually just driving around mystery shopping. I'm like, fantastic. 2 weeks later, I'm working for Turk, and now I'm breaking into the electronics, the consumer electronics field, and I'm a marketing coordinator. So this is the way, things happen. Like when your career kind of develops through these different opportunities. In an act one for me, it was all about recognizing an opportunity and breaking into into an area just by kind of going for it. So after my time there, I started, getting more and more experience, and I ended up working ultimately at an advertising agency called Digitas. Our clients were blue chip clients from General Motors. I worked on Cadillac and Chevy for a number of years. I worked at AstraZeneca for a number of years. So it was during that phase of my career where I learned so much more about marketing and the nuts and the bolts, not just the creativity part of it, but how it's operationalized and what it was like to be or to develop a growth engine for leads and for customer retention and things like that. So the next phase that led me into Crunchtime was, well, I learned so much about marketing and advertising up to that point, was involved in the creative process, was involved in the operational side of marketing, and figured now it's time for me to actually go out and work for my own brand instead of other people's brands, client brands meaning. And I met a gentleman through a mutual friend who owned a small restaurant technology company called Crunchtime. And they had a few clients. They had a product that was back of house that managed a restaurant's inventory and labor systems. Basically the nuts and bolts of running a restaurant is divided into food and labor costs. Crunchtime helped you manage your food and labor costs. They had a great product, a few good customers, but their identity and the way that they tried to tell their story was kind of lacking. So after my conversation with the CEO, he decided, you know what? Why don't you come in and help with our marketing? And so I did. And I basically became their head of marketing, a very small team, me and one other person, basically. And we started off, they had about 500 or so restaurants, locations that used their software. Well, fast forward about 8 or 9 years later, I'm still there, and we had about 65,000 restaurants use our software. And we became so big and so influential in the space that we all but created a category inside of restaurant technology. We essentially developed the digital back office for restaurants. Attracted a lot of attention from venture capital, had a great exit. And now that I'm in my third act is Popcorn. And Popcorn is an independent fractional marketing agency that helps restaurant technology companies go to market. So all of the experience that I've had over the years, including with Crunchtime, understanding what restaurants are looking for from a technology perspective, I'm taking that knowledge and helping other restaurant technology companies. So that was a very long explanation for my career, but nonetheless, thank you for suffering through that.
Paul, you broke down your career journey into 3 acts, right? Very clearly defined. Act 1, Act 2, you're in Act 3 now. Through each of these periods, of course, you displayed or you demonstrated the ability to grow, to learn new things, and to constantly move forwards, right? To transition yourself to that next act with the new capabilities, the new skills that you have. Of course, there were little growth shifts through each of these periods that I'm sure some larger ones led to that next act. But all through your time and through your journey, what was that most impactful growth shift moment you had that really reshaped the way you think about and approach business today?
Yeah. One of the things I think what's incredibly important is you have to have an opinion. You have to have a take. That means that if you're watching things develop, then that's what you are. You are part of the audience. You are watching things unfold. However, if you are part of the conversation and have an opinion, a take, an angle for which you can discuss or put out there something different that maybe people haven't thought of before, or maybe makes them think about, oh, well, that's an interesting idea. You have to be vocal. You have to express an opinion. In marketing in particular, you need to be able to make claims. A big part of your marketing message is a claim. Well, how can you support those claims? Did you think through enough about what your claim is that you can actually back it up with some kind of either empirical data or some sort of proof point or something that supports what it is you're saying? So it's not just you saying it, but it's also having that some kind of foundational data point or proof point that helps support your take.
So it sounds like really, as you said, not being shy to have opinions and being able to speak them, but also having the facts and the data to back that up, knowing your salt, knowing what you're worth, standing up for yourself and putting yourself out there, especially in marketing, right? Being a little bit bold.
Yeah, I would say that. Absolutely, David. Yeah, you have to be a little bit bold. You have to have an opinion, because if you're not bold and you don't have an opinion in marketing, then you're really kind of just there. You're not a participant.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that also applies to anyone who is ambitious and trying to move ahead in any aspect of life, right? You need to be able to speak out. You need to put yourself out there. You need to get noticed, especially when it comes to marketing. You need to do things differently and speak about what you are, what you do, and how you do it, and really put yourself out there in ways that other people aren't. Right? You need to stand out from the crowd. Otherwise, you get lost.
And that takes a certain amount of fearlessness, right, David? I mean, that there is, I feel like a lot of folks in marketing, particularly those that are starting out, need to kind of get over themselves a little bit. And there is a point, that growth, as you mentioned, where you come to your senses, and maybe that just may be through your experience or your age or just the wisdom or what have you, but those that can recognize that you're probably thinking more about yourself than other people are thinking about you is so incredibly true. Don't worry about messing up. Don't worry about tripping over your words. Just get started. Get started and be active and be a participant. And I think you'll find that things will start to open up for you.
Agree more. Paul, tell us a little bit more about Popcorn. You're helping restaurant technology companies with branding, positioning, product marketing, right? You're helping them stand out through the marketing and put themselves out there, get noticed, right? What does that actually look like in practice? When you come in and you work with a client, I mean, there's a lot of restaurant technology companies out there, right? How does it you come in and you deliver unique strategies and marketing approaches for each of them to not only fit their brand, but to differentiate themselves?
Yeah, let me give you a little bit of background. When we talk about, and this could be for restaurant technology or be almost any industry supporting technology. But looking at restaurants, the average restaurant has between 15 and 20 technology systems that help it run. All right. And technology help is everything from a point of sale system to a labor scheduling system to an inventory management system to reviews to loyalty, to seating and reservations. It goes on and on and on. There's a lot. There are over 4,000 restaurant technology companies that are supporting hospitality. 4,000, ranging across an entire gamut of different categories. And now with AI, there are more companies popping up even faster. So what Popcorn does, we're a fractional marketing agent. I'm a fractional CMO for a number of restaurant technology companies. Typically, I work with between 4 and 5 restaurant tech companies at any given time. Usually, I've been fortunate enough to have clients that like to stay. But ultimately, my job is trying to be, to get them to a point where they're either well-funded now and they can start building a marketing team and I can gracefully exit myself out, or they just want me to run market. They don't even want to think about it. They're busy building products. They're busy doing the product development, and they need an agency. They need somebody that understands the industry, that understands what restaurant operators are looking for from a technology perspective, and they need content. So Popcorn is that restaurant technology specialist that helps restaurant technology companies stand out, get noticed, and be more thoughtful in their brand and their value proposition.
Yeah, and fractional leadership is incredibly valuable for companies today, especially for early stage startups and tech companies who don't have the revenue or the capacity to build out a new department or run all these things on their own, right? Bringing
That's
that
right.
expert from the outside, such as yourself, who has scaled a similar company before through marketing, get the expertise you need at a fraction of the cost and be able to grow effectively to the point where, yeah, you can continue focusing on product development, like you said, or, start building out a team, perhaps with the guidance of the fractional who helped them get there. Paul, could you share a story with us about, how it is you came in and worked as a fractional with one of your clients and what it is that you actually did that they weren't able to do before and the result that you really drove?
Well, yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, a current client of mine is a company called Curbit, Curbit, and Curbit is a digital order orchestration company. What is that? Well, we've all ordered food online, whether it be through an app or through the restaurant's website or through DoorDash or what have you, right? Well, Curbit is this piece of software that sits in between the point of sale system. I'm going to get a little technical, between a point of sale system and a kitchen display system. When the order comes in, Curbit essentially deconstructs that order to understand exactly how long it takes, exactly when to fire it, meaning put it, to prepare it, exactly what time it will be ready. And then they message the guest so that the guest says, oh, okay, my order will be ready at 12:40. Now, the amount of science that goes into understanding exactly when the food will come out is vast. But that is so critically important because the worst thing that a restaurant can do is either make the food too quickly and it sits on the shelf and now it's cold by the time it's picked up, or the customer comes in and the food's nowhere to be seen, right? You want a great guest experience. So Curbit helps create these on-time, what we like to call in marketing, what the tagline is, happy handoffs. So I've been working with the Curbit folks since probably mid-2024. They were gaining traction, delivering strong results, but they were also kind of creating this new category, digital orchestration, capacity. Nobody was doing this. So we needed to create buzz about this new category that promised to get food to customers on time. This is a major problem. And when you look at the amount of digital sales that are happening in restaurants, over 40% now of restaurant sales are becoming through digital. And that number grows almost exponentially each year. So with the amount of business now that's coming digitally, making sure that your food is on time and hot, or even now ice drinks, making sure the ice is still iced when you pick up, because the beverage revolution. Okay, so what we did for these guys is we helped create with their storytelling and their awareness. Everything from customer videos to case studies to ROI support, sales, metric supported case studies, endlessly blogging, creating the content that just is that steady drumbeat that talks about their value proposition, who it's for, and creating content that resonates with their core audience, which is predominantly CTOs and COOs, right, in the restaurant space, right? We're constantly tackling what their pain points are in the content that we create so that it resonates. But a major part of the strategy is every time we win, we do a press release, right? We do a blog. We put that content across the social media. And when you're creating a category, clients want to see success before they commit. So that steady drumbeat of new clients signing on, new successes, more successes, more successes, that helps create a stack of dominoes. Because once you see consistently restaurants signing on and experiencing great results, everybody's going to want to say, well, why don't we have that? We should have that too. So that's what we've been doing with Curbit very successfully. They're on a terrific trajectory.
Yeah, Paul, with the number of restaurant tech companies out there, it seems like so many of them need help of this sort, right? I mean, just the bringing in the nuts and bolts to help them not only understand what needs to be done, but actually being able to drive that for them as well, exactly as you displayed. With so many potential companies out there, right, I imagine there's a lot of competition for you as well. Right. So when it comes to client acquisition and, being able to stand out amongst the competition, amongst the noise, really be able to make a mark for yourself in the industry, where are you finding the most success today when it comes with attracting more companies like this who really need your help and who need to work with somebody who knows what they need, not just someone who has a little bit of experience and thinks they can help.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of very fortunate in that, as you mentioned in my introduction, I have been a graphic designer, since the 90s. And I do have a pretty strong business acumen, never mind the education, but also just the positions that I've held through my career. So I am a marketer that can execute. I'm not just a dreamer. I'm a doer. So that in and of itself is, I think you can say, a key differentiator between, say, myself and maybe a few and other people that are consultants. Popcorn is all about strategy plus execution. Right? We execute.
You bring not just strategy, but execution. You do things differently than others, and you can drive an incredible result. So when we're looking at client acquisition today for a fractional such as yourself, I mean, you have the experience, you have the strategy, you have the execution. What are you doing today to proactively secure more clients for your next stage of growth?
I think something that's so incredibly critical for anybody that wants to get into fractional work or agency work is you need to diversify your services. So for example, one of the things that Popcorn is now getting into is tech enablement. Well, what is that? Tech enablement, it's one thing, to help technology companies find their brand voice and create content and storytelling and attract leads. It's another thing entirely to be able to take that technology and then implement it into a restaurant operation. So whereas once I'm only working for restaurant technology companies to help them, Popcorn is now actually helping restaurants implement technologies. So we have a technology enablement practice now led by a very bright individual, Audrey Bogoni, who is familiar with so many different restaurant technology companies and can help restaurants configure their system to execute on a strategy. So for example, if the restaurant strategy, if the C-suite inside of a restaurant says, we need to figure out a way to become more profitable, how do we do that through the technology stack that we have? Well, we can go in and configure the system to try to lower their food costs more, or to identify menu items that might be really profitable and really popular, and try to eliminate menu items that are unprofitable and just taking up space, right? So there's a whole bunch of different ways in which you can now use these technologies to really work for the restaurants. So one of the things that restaurants struggle with is they invest a lot of money in technology and then they set it up and then they don't touch it for a couple of years. But things change, strategies change, times change, and they need to go back in and reconfigure and do some tweaks. And so by diversifying now, we can now work with not just the tech companies, but also the restaurants too, to help really to almost in some ways double our exposure.
So Paul, it sounds like part of your client acquisition strategy for growth now is diversifying the skill set and the execution that you deliver, right? Not just staying on the side of the marketing and the brand development, but also bringing in additional complementary service to almost make yourself indispensable to clients that you're working with, to lengthen your or to increase your average client lifetime value, right? Imagine through that, and once you're in the door, once you're working with people, referrals is generally a strong way to go for many consultants and fractionals today. But I imagine, especially with what you're doing now, you're looking at securing clients and really keeping them long term and focusing on that as part of your growth strategy, really, that differentiation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, for sure. But as mentioned earlier, the goal here is not to stay with a client for the sake of staying with a client. The idea is that we want to put them on a trajectory where, we can now either work with this client on a maintenance basis, help them build and to scale and to grow. If we're not, bringing value, if we're not going to work for our clients every day with purpose and intent, then you're probably going to not be suited for this business for long.
Absolutely, right? Clients need to know that you're not just thinking about yourself, but you're really thinking about them, that next stage of growth as well. Once you hit certain landmarks, things are working well, right? The way to keep a client and the way to increase the client value is by bringing them more value. Right? Take them to that next level, that next stage of growth. And for a fractional out there, maybe such as yourself, Paul, once you've established the marketing and the brand strategy and everything that's working and they want to start building out a team, maybe that next level of growth is helping them build the team, right? Providing more value and distilling what you've learned and what you've taught them so they can continue with it. And then maybe you won't be needed anymore, but maybe you can continue providing value in another way, right?
I love that philosophy. Absolutely, David. Yes.
Amazing. Paul, we're talking about technology right now. We're talking about growth. Given your experience with technology and your background, the clients that you have, tell us a little bit now where AI comes into play as part of your own growth strategy.
Yeah. AI is absolutely indispensable to our growth strategy. AI is indispensable to our daily operational work. And it's not necessarily agentic AI. I can't say that we have any AI working in the background, creating things and putting things out there for us. I like to think that as deep and as incredibly relevantly personalized and tweaked our LLMs are across all of our clients, because each one of our client, will have its own LLM where we are feeding it with as many brand truths as we can. And that has been incredibly important for developing content that is always through the lens of the client value proposition, and the brand voice. But to answer your question, how are we using AI aside from content? We're using AI to help us think outside the box. I mean, there is no greater tool, as far as I'm concerned right now, that helps you think of the different angles, right? So when I said earlier about having a take and having an opinion and being able to back that take and opinion up with something thoughtful, right? Well, I think AI is a tremendous tool for not only to help you think about a strategy and the different branches that strategy can go to, but also how is that then supported? What is it about that idea and strategy that is supported empirically with data? And I think there's no better tools out there than AI that can help you formulate that and stand behind a take or an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the processing power of AI, of LLMs is incredible, right? You can feed it so much information while still freeing up your time to think about those high leverage tasks, the things that are the most important through part of the process. You don't want to remove the critical thinking, but the more information you can feed it, the more angles you can give it, the more brand truths you can give to it, then the more you can free up yourself from having to sift through that information and figure out, what's the best here, right? You can get a really quick analysis and summary of all of the perspectives, of all the takes and all the angles to help you really pinpoint, what is outside the box, what is different right now, how can we
That's right. And how do you leverage it, through the lens of the personas that you're trying to market to, right? So, for example, everything with every one of our clients, we start off with a message map. And if you've ever done a message map exercise before, if you haven't done one, I should say it's absolutely critical that you do one, whether if it's for the company that you work for now, or if you want to do it but a message map essentially puts together your entire brand truth, right? What is your brand archetype, for example? Are you a rebel? Are you a sage? Are you the hero? Are you the everyman? I mean, what is your voice? What are you trying to project? What are your key differentiators? How are you different than the other people? Do you have any data that can back that up? What are the core features that you have to have that are just table stakes? What are the pain points across the C-suite, for example? If you're a B2B company, well, what are the pain points for your marketing customers, for your operations customers, for your finance? How do you speak to everybody in the C-suite? So a message map essentially creates this Rosetta Stone for everything that you do. It's the truth and it breaks down different ways to communicate based upon all of your brand truth. It's pretty phenomenal. So feeding that message map into AI just as a core component to build on is critically important.
Well, if we look at AI for creating content, right, a lot of people are making content with AI and it's really shitty, right? With yourself, I mean, you have a background as a designer, you're a creative, you're a storyteller, you're a marketer. You mentioned using AI to help create content today. So from your perspective, right, as an expert, as a creative, as a marketer, how do you advise leaders to leverage AI to properly create content without compromising authenticity and, just risking making junk?
Yeah, I first and foremost, I think that authenticity will also come from what you feed your LLM, right? So that's where the message map comes into play. And there's really no AI involved here. The way that you structure your message map is essentially through conversations with your client. And that conversation should cross into the different disciplines in your client. We should be talking to the operations person, to the financial person, to the marketing team, to the CEO, to the product developers. You're getting a really great understanding as to what are the key differentiators of this company, right? So let's get to the truth there. The message map should handle the truth. Now, once you place that into your LLM and you feed it other supporting documents, and those other documents can be from technical papers, et cetera, to understanding what your TAM is, right? Your total addressable market. Who is your buyer? Being very definitive about who your target audience is. All of that information should help you create relevant content. Now, the other part of that, so okay, great, you have all of this data that you fed your AI about your client. Well, now what? Well, now you need to start asking it questions, or help me develop content that would get these target audience excited, and you can bucket it by, I need some operational content. I need, what would a CFO look for? How does this satisfy the marketing team, right? You need to ask it the right questions. And the way that you balance that out, and this is with AI or not, is as a marketer, you need to have one foot firmly planted in the seller and the other one in the buyer. You need to understand the balance, what it is the seller's trying to communicate and what it is the buyer is trying to receive. What is going to be useful and valuable to the buyer? So you have to straddle both of those things. And if you're creating content that doesn't have that balance, then chances are it's going to fall one way or the other. And usually on the client side, and that's not very compelling.
So it's making sure that the right information is there, the right prompts, the right questions are there as well, but making sure that everything is there and you have a clear understanding of how everything is working together. You're not just saying, hey, go create me a content calendar, tell me what I should create, right? But how leaders and business owners and creatives need to think is you need to come in still with a strategy, with a plan, with a clear execution, and AI is just coming in to maybe fill in some of the gaps and lighten up the work.
That's right. And also, I can't stress enough how important those key differentiators are. You really need to harp on what makes you different, right? And I think that AI can help you tell that story in different angles. And again, when you start thinking about the C-suite and speaking about how you solve a problem through the perspective of marketing, or how you solve that problem through the perspective of ops, that gives you multiple ways to tell a story that just doesn't come naturally. I mean, not everybody, only AI can do that, unless you really hired a team of subject matter experts that can distill that information down and put it into content, which, let's face it, would be not only extraordinarily time consuming, but extraordinarily expensive. So, it's a fantastic tool, indispensable.
Paul, your story covers creative branding, strategic implementation, and the power of embracing new technologies. For the listeners out there who are navigating their own growth shift, what is the single most important piece of advice that you would leave them with about stepping out of their own shell, sharing their opinions, and communicating their own unique differentiators?
I would say you get out of your own head. I thrive on inspiration. Right. So you need to put yourself in a creative environment that gives you permission to think. My studio is a thinking studio. I surround myself with things that inspire me, that help me think. I can't stress enough how important it is to be yourself and put yourself in an environment that helps you think creatively, that helps you be empathetic as well. When I said earlier about, straddling the client and the buyer, the audience, you really need to think about both sides. And I think the best marketers are the ones that understand that you have to put yourself in the buyer's shoes without ever losing sight of what the objective is from the client side.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights with the audience today. For anyone listening who might like to learn more about Popcorn or would like to continue the conversation, what would be the best way to find you?
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, first and foremost, visit popcorngtm.com. It's popcorngtm, like go to market. And you can find me, just type Paul Molinari in Google. I'd love to, if you're on LinkedIn, want to connect. Usually LinkedIn is, I guess you can say, my social media platform of choice.
Thank you again for joining us on The Growth Shift.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.